Good afternoon, everyone. We'll give you a couple more minutes for others to join, and then we can make a quick start. We seem to have a good full house, so I'll give it another 30 seconds, if that's okay. Oh, almost done now. So we can begin. And good afternoon and welcome. This is a second part of the four-part series for our colleagues and friends in TUC, Disability Group. And yesterday we covered a whole range of assistive technologies, and hopefully it went well for everyone and they found it useful. Today we will be focusing on an important area of disability, which is essentially a hidden disability, which is neurodiversity. Most of the population who are affected may not even know they are on that spectrum of neurodiversity. They've always struggled in life, in education, but it's a kind of a revelation when they find out the cause of all their problems. So we felt it was an important area where we could highlight in our second part of the webinar workshops. We are very fortunate to have one of our very experienced colleagues, Martina Foreman, from our sister company or partner company, Genius Within. A very experienced coach, and certainly she has a great insight about the world of neurodiversity, which I hope you will find very useful. Just a very quick housekeeping. We are going to use captioning again. It's available at the bottom of your screen, closed caption. If you click on that, show subtitle. You can also look at the transcription as well. I do appreciate some people might struggle to keep up with the transcription. We have to be mindful the speed of the presentation. We're hoping next sessions we will have BSL interpreters. This one was arranged very quickly and we didn't really get the right people to be available, but we're aiming for next week and the week after to bring BSL as well, so to make it fully accessible. But one thing I would like to actually highlight, the accessibility of meetings, particularly at the time where everybody's working from home, is become all that more important, especially when people are doing webinars after webinars, Zoom after Zoom or Teams. The captioning is actually available in many formats. So if I explain the differences so that it kind of gives you a clear idea, if you're talking to your membership and they're struggling to participate in day-to-day meetings, these are the options. The most popular one, Microsoft has a Teams platform. Most companies use that, especially public sector. It's free of charge for them as part of their Office and Windows kind of a license. They have a captioning built in. It uses automatic speech recognition. It's not 100%. It's getting better. It gives you about 90% or so accuracy. It all depends on the speakers and the connection the internet connection as well as your microphone, but it's useful to know that you can always switch it on. You should be able to switch it on when you're having a meeting. There's also real-time palantypists or stenographers who actually do it live. They're more like note takers. They're not full conversation, but they're very good. They're accurate, and they're too. But the problem with that is difficult to arrange in short notice, and they cost a lot of money. So employees won't be able to provide them unless there is a disability-specific reason. What we are fortunate to have help from our friends from Verbit. They are kind of a hybrid. They use their automatic speech recognition and then provide human backend to correct those 10% mistakes, so you get 99% accurate words. It's good for people who are with hearing loss or autistic, because the context would be taken away if you even get 5% errors in your sentence. So hence we use Verbit quite extensively, and they're also very good for security situations, especially courtrooms and places where you have to have some documented meeting. So these are various options, and obviously it's important for any meetings you attend, please make sure you have at least one of these available so your colleagues can participate and make sure they can contribute. Okay, well, that's my part done. I will introduce Martina to take over and does a lot with all the information, and there's a lot to learn. So I promise you it will be quite an exciting and a learning experience. Anyway, thank you again and good luck. Thank you, Martina.
Thank you, Nasser. So welcome everybody. Thank you to those who have found the chat box and said hello. We welcome any comments and questions into the chat box. Just make sure that you click down the blue box to panelists so that you can ask your questions whenever they come up, and we will get to your questions as soon as we can. I am aiming for a delivery for about 60 to 90 minutes. And what I'd like to do is have a break in about an hour so we can go and stretch our legs and, have a comfort break. As Nasser said, I work for Genius Within, and my name's Martina Foreman. I've been an associate coach for the last 7 years, and in the last few years I was also delivering training, and just this morning I was working with DSTL, which is an arm of the Ministry of Defence. I affectionately call them my nerds because a lot of neurodiverse people work there, and frankly we would want them to, because they do some very specialised work and they solve some very, very difficult problems, and they do all that with great aplomb. So I spent 3 hours with them this morning, and as Nasser said, a lot of people with neurodiversity, they don't know that they're actually affected by it. So I had somebody, he's 58, and he was diagnosed with autism and ADHD 2 months ago. And for someone like me, if I met him face to face, within a day, I would recognize his typical traits. And what I'd like to do is today just go through what those typical traits are and characteristics to look out for. One of the things that is causing some controversy among the community is people saying, oh, isn't everyone a bit on the spectrum? Or isn't everyone a little, I'm being dyslexic today. Now, the reason that causes a bit of upset is because you don't have the struggle every day. And when you belittle the struggles that people have, it makes it quite upsetting. So I would like to just, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Natalia. Part-time neurodiversity is not a thing. So it's like with anything, just notice your languaging. when I do my training, what I like people to do is to just be aware of their curiosity. So to become curious rather than defensive. So moving you from a position of contempt or judgment, as in everyone with autism or every autistic person is meticulous and will spot all my mistakes, to, oh, tell me how your autism affects you. And like, you're autistic, that's great. Like, what can I do to make your life easier now that we're working together? So things like that, sort of shifting yourself to a more curious position works really well. And that's one of my top tips. So I've just had a question come in the chat box. How do people get tested? So in the workplace, I've been told you're all disability leads. So I'm hoping that you will type into the box and help each other out with this one if I've missed anything. The way that you can get tested in the workplace is to go via occupational health or human resources. And the way you get tested outside of work is to go to your GP and get a referral. And one of my clients was talking me through how she got her ADHD testing done, and that is, I think there is a right to choose. So if anyone's heard about that right to choose, just pop that into the chat box, and then let's get a little side conversation going in the chat box so you can work together to get your answers. Okay, so let me pop to the next slide. And just at the bottom of this slide, you can see that we're on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on Instagram. So if you're on any of those platforms, please do give us a look. And I favor, for information flow, I like LinkedIn because we are able to connect bigger pieces of information on LinkedIn, and also promote events like this. And also we're working with Professor Amanda Kirby. And if you go onto our website, you'll see an adjustment screener, and we've got a slide coming up that will talk you through that. Okay, so I've not seen that much come up in the chat box. I just want to make sure everybody, thank you. Yeah, so everybody's got access to the chat box. All right, that's lovely. And I've just discovered there's a Q&A box as well. So I'll just pay attention to that. Just to check, I think you can type an answer in there if it's only for the panelists or if everybody can dive in there. So if you use your chat box, and we can work through it in that way. So let's just have a look at this next slide. What we'd like to talk about is inclusion. And the way we like to see it is that it's a moral, social, and economic imperative. And when we exclude the diversity of humanity, then as a whole, human potential can be squandered. Yeah. So the purpose of this session is an introduction to neurodiversity. What are these hidden disabilities? What does that even mean? Talking about exclusion and inclusion, the diagnosis deficit, what the workplace impact is, what might you notice, the strengths and challenges, and supporting colleagues with some systemic inclusion and managing diversity in performance. Okay, so I'm going to pop to the next slide. Now, this chap that I was talking about who just discovered there is a name to his quirkiness, and it's called autism. I said some people hide it really well, but actually some people don't know they've got anything and just get on with it. So this chap was in the military, in the Navy actually, and he did really, really well because there was structure, there were rules, and everything was set out in a way that he could work through it. And he's also got ADHD, so there was a lot of risk and excitement, so that worked really well for him. A hidden disability is something you don't know you've got until it gets pointed out. So it could be a lot of my women with ADHD, they all get diagnosed quite late because it gets missed, because they hide it really well. They call themselves dizzy, ditzy, and they just get through life and manage the best way that they can. And quite often it's not until their children are diagnosed with something at school, because we're getting better at diagnosing, that they themselves, because this stuff is hereditary, it does go through the family lineage, they themselves think, oh, I'm quite a lot like my child who's just been diagnosed, and so therefore could it be affecting me? And the answer may very well be yes. And this is what happens to a lot of people. In fact, Cher, the singer, found out that she had dyslexia because her daughter was diagnosed with dyslexia. So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. So I've just answered the question that came up in the chat box. I personally don't like to call things disorders, because if you're born that way, then you're welcome. Then how is it a disorder if you're managing to function and be a valued part of the society? I watched a really lovely video with a young man explaining how he calls his ADHD attention different. And so since then, I have introduced the concept of calling it attention different, because it's a way of paying attention, but if you're not moving, you're not paying attention. So I can't see anyone, and that's not normally how I run my trainings and deliveries. But if there's anyone out there who has got ADHD, if you're sitting still, I'm worried you're not paying attention right now. So please do twitch, move, run around, and I'll know that it's going in. So just having a look at the slide. On the left-hand side, so we've got 4 columns. At the top on the left, it says applied, and then it says clinical. So I'm just having a look at the chat box. Thank you. Yes. Do you know women hide it so much better than men? And I don't know how that is exactly, but a lot of my clients who've been diagnosed, female clients who've been diagnosed with autism or ADHD or both, it's not until their late 30s and 40s. So they somehow managed to get through life and organize themselves in such a way as to not get caught out so much. Whereas the boys, they can, and this is typical, this is like a stereotype, the boys can be a little bit destructive with their ADHD. So I had an opportunity to work on a project at HMP Rochester in 2019, and was supporting 19 to 21-year-olds in this male prison, and most of them were diagnosed or undiagnosed ADHD, and they'd all had very similar backgrounds of being very disruptive in school, being sent to PRU, and then not doing well there either, and getting caught out and being on the wrong side of the law. Also, there is an article came out in The Guardian a month or so ago, saying that we're noticing that it's a 4 to 1, so 4 boys to 1 girl being diagnosed with autism. But typically most studies have been done on white males with brown hair. Yeah. So if the studies are being done on a set type of person, then yes. And it's the same as with the painkiller Nurofen. A lot of the early tests were done on men and the way they experience pain. And it wasn't until the makers of Nurofen worked out that women have pain too, that then tested on female studies and worked out that women experience pain differently. So then created a whole lovely different batch of painkillers for the female problems that we sometimes have. So that was lovely. Back to the slide. Now we separate it out, and the way I look at it is this. On the left-hand column, so let's call it column number 1, it starts on the left. We've got applied, there's all the DISs in there, dyslexia, DCD is dyspraxia, so developmental coordination disorder, so dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and dysgraphia. Yeah. Those can be tested within the space of 3 hours. So that's why we call them applied. And then the next column, number 2, is clinical. So it can take 2 or 3 years to get an official diagnosis with Tourette's, autism, and ADHD or ADD. There's no H in the ADD because there's less, let's call it, energy happening in that person to make them want to move around so much. I worked with somebody at GlaxoSmithKline, and a young woman just graduated, doing really well, and diagnosis of dyslexia. And from her behaviors, i.e. not really wanting to sit still, not being able to settle if she hadn't done any exercise or walked her dog in the morning, we worked out actually she's very ADHD. You don't need an official diagnosis to be able to get support. So she mentioned this, and her line manager said, well, listen, just come in later and make sure you've done some exercise or done something before you come in. So when you do come into work, you're nice and settled. So one of the top tips from this training is try not to wait for any official diagnosis, but see what can be done and put in place to alleviate the struggle. Yeah, quite often people will be struggling, but they won't say anything because it could stigmatize them in the workplace. And that's hopefully where you will come in and be able to say, well, why don't we put this reasonable adjustment in place? What is this person struggling with? And this is the thing that we've got that could possibly help. So that could include assistive software or slightly different processes or systems in place. Okay, just a quick question from Anne, thank you. So what have we got for people in precarious situations, freelancers? So what you've got is, have you heard of Access to Work? So if you Google or check in your browser, Access to Work, that is a government agency that's got a pot of money, and they will hopefully be able to give you some support in the form of paying for assistive software, any kind of equipment, and also give you some coaching. So follow that up if you can.
Yeah, we covered that yesterday, Martina, but it's very helpful to, no, it's good to remind, because Access to Work does pay for neurodiversity. And what is interesting, it used to be a medical model that you had to have proof you were either autistic or dyslexic, but they no longer need to prove. So if you feel you need that intervention and you know what the solution is, then talking to the Access to Work advisors, you should be able to get those interventions approved.
Lovely, thank you. And Anna's also just popped something into the chat box for you. Because at Genius, we work together, we work hand in hand with Microlink to support people in the workplace.
In fact, we have a series of videos on our website that explains the whole Access to Work, slightly dated, but it's still valid. It shows the benefits and how to, what it pays for, and obviously if you can claim for it. So it should be something that you could actually go and apply for.
And I always tell people to don't keep it to yourself, but share it with everyone you know.
Yeah.
You know, tell your family, your friends, your dog, because a lot of people don't know that there's actually a pot of money out there that can help you, and it's not just people in the workplace; it's people, self-employed people as well.
Just for the benefit of those who weren't here yesterday, Access to work can be a bit of a minefield in terms of the process. Itself, the initial part is fairly straightforward, but the follow-up and implementation, get the solution, who's going to pay for it. We offered a kind of a concierge service to our clients, which I said is extended to the TUC members to also come and ask for that. So it basically doesn't cost them anything, but we take away the headache of actually doing the end-to-end process of getting the recommendations. For example, somebody who's got autism or ADHD and requires coaching, coping strategies. When they come to us, we go back again. We use Genius Within to deliver that service. So whilst they may be mentioned on the report, they don't have to be. We can actually take care of the fulfillment, just making sure they get the service as quickly as possible, so they don't actually have to be without it for too long.
Thank you. And I'm really appreciating everybody adding to the Q&A and to the chat box. I welcome all your comments in those boxes. So Mark was asking, could you talk a bit more about inattentive ADHD, which seems to affect women more? I don't know if it affects women more. So whoever's got ADHD is going to be affected in different ways, but there is they're trying to break it down into inattentive and attentive. But basically, everybody's unique, and yes, women manage to mask it. They don't know they've got it until much later in life. And what I would say on ADHD is there's lots of things like little strategies that you can put in place. Things like using the Pomodoro timer. So making you focus on something for 25 minutes and then go away and have a break for 5 minutes. Doing things like not trying to stuff everything in, like putting too much on your task list. A lot of the things that I often do with people involves time management. And I think I've got a slide coming up that talks a bit more about that. So back to this slide, and we're looking at the column 1 and 2 from the left. People are born with this. It relates to with the DISs relates to reading, writing, motor control. That's the applied side of things. The clinical side of things relates to behavioral skills, so communication, self-control. Yeah. With autism, we've noticed the differences in the brain and in the nervous system, and with ADHD, we noticed there's differences in the hormonal system, the endocrine system. Yeah. So we're still discovering more about that, but that's one of the reasons why people with ADHD can take amphetamines, and it helps them to slow down and focus, where for the rest of us, we would just go bonkers and do all sorts of crazy stuff on amphetamines. So how interesting is that? Yeah, so what works for one person might not work for the other, but obviously getting the right treatment at the right time and then getting the strategies put in place will help someone with ADHD at whatever stage they're at in the journey. Just to cover, DCD is developmental coordination disorder, otherwise known as dyspraxia. Yeah, which is one of my favorites. A lot of my social workers are diagnosed with dyslexia, but what makes them fantastic social workers is their dyspraxia, which I call the unloved cousin of dyslexia, because it gets missed so often. I think LiveScribe would be covered under access to work because it's assistive technology, isn't it?
Actually, Martina, it's an interesting subject, because job choices or giving people responsibilities, if they have on the neurodiversity, certain jobs actually fit that profile better. So if you get the right job, you can actually flourish and thrive. If you get the wrong job, then it can actually kill off your career. So how do employers identify the strength of those individuals in what role they'll be better? So that is something that often there's a mismatch. You know, I've had a case where a person working for DWP for many years in finance. She had autism. She would just love the job. And then they moved her to customer service in a totally different area, and she hated it. She was signed off on depression and for several months. And the line managers refused to reinstate her back to the old job. Eventually, they did. So this is really important. It's sometimes a matter of looking at why that person is not performing and identifying the strengths and the weaknesses that comes from the neurodiversity and making sure that matches the kind of role they want them to do.
And even on a larger level, BT, about 8 years ago, removed the clerical layer supporting people going out in their vans. And what happens, so I was coaching some of these older gents who were just desperate to get into their retirement age so they could leave, because what had happened was they were happy. They called themselves cable monkeys. A lot of them, a lot of people who are excluded from school by it being a literacy-based system of education, find themselves in jobs where they're actually using their strengths. Yes, so it ticks a lot of boxes for being able to plan out in your imagination where you're going to put all the copper wiring and how you're going to route it through a building and into the box. So all these cable monkeys were running around for like decades, being happy as Larry, up poles in the middle of winter, in pits, digging out tunnels, because they had that clerical level, that layer supporting them. And then BT said, we're going to change the business. We're going to get rid of all clerical, and you're going to get given iPads and iPhones so that you need to read your own emails and download your own instructions. Well,
that didn't go well.
It did not go well at all for a lot of people, for probably hundreds of men, not so many women, but.
So the relevance to this particular issue is actually for our trade union members and colleagues here. This lady I mentioned from DWP, she actually brought the trade union members as the rep to help to represent in tribunals and escalation. And the problem was they kept asking for the wrong thing. They were telling their employer, you're not really looking after her welfare. She should be allowed to have more time off because of her depression. Yet the poor lady was actually asking, look, give me my old job back. I love my job and I want to do that. So this is really important for you to realize sometimes the impact and the effect of the condition is what people try to deal with rather than the cause. So once you understand the behavior and the kind of the issues you might face, then it's easier for you to go and find a solution. And to be honest, certain sectors also are interesting, because I think, again, it's important because those attending here represent a wide group of public sector workers. Certain groups have more tendency to have neurodiverse workforce. I mean, I've worked with prison service, and I work I've also worked in the military. As Martina mentioned, parts of the security service, they have a lot of really highly talented neurodiverse people working. It's not by chance. It's the way they structure of business that, very disciplined rules, and they love the kind of a support they get. Once you actually look at that, then you wonder why there are a high number of policemen who are dyslexic or have the neurodiversity on them. Partly because they've joined the forces from the age of 16 because they weren't really academically good. End of their service with with flying colors, come out. Either they get lost in the system because they lose them orientation, they don't know what to do, or they join one of the blue forces like ambulance, police, and even prison guards. So these are really important information that will help you to identify if that group are at risk of being discriminated on or not getting the kind of interventions that will actually help them to improve the future. Sorry, Martin, I thought it was relevant again to highlight some of those issues, because you do come across a lot of people. I've been dealing with nurses who have also on the neurodiversity. As you said, there's that care and the passion, as well as some of the things that come with dyspraxia. but certainly then the learning disabilities that follows it stops them progressing and getting promoted because they just simply struggle with the literacy part. Anyway, so I'll just let you carry on. I just thought maybe it was relevant to interject.
Thank you. Thank you. We've also just noticed Maxienne, thank you. That's beautiful that your youngest is doing so well. With the hypermobility, we noticed that often is comorbid or co-occurring with dyspraxia. So I don't know how often that is co-occurring so it sounds like there's a nervous system that is on hyper alert. It's like it's a ramped up nervous system, which is what you get often with autism, and there's a crossover with autism and dyspraxia. So it could well be something that is often co-occurring. I know co-occurring or comorbidity happens with autism and dyslexia quite often, so that stuff gets missed. And also something else that's quite important to know is that depending on who you go to see is the outcome of your diagnosis. I've had one client diagnosed with dyslexia, and then 10 years later they've gone to see somebody else and they've been diagnosed with dyspraxia as well as dyslexia. So sometimes these things can get missed. So quite often don't rely just on what an expert has said at that one point in time. If you're having difficulties in other places that are outside of the typical traits of the protected condition, then, or your hidden disability, then you have to attend to those as well. Okay, in this slide on the right hand side, in these two columns, we've also got acquired disabilities, and we've got mental health, which could possibly, potentially recover, and then neurological disability or brain injury. So I was working with a client who suffered a stroke, which completely wiped out his short-term memory. And this chap builds satellites for a living. He wasn't able to take on board any new wiring for the satellites that he was building. So obviously that caused him a lot of stress and concern for his job. And we worked on some strategies that supported him continuing in his job. And these satellites, they're only as big as transit vans, but they cost £350 million each. So it's quite expensive if you make a little mistake on one of those things. All right, so let's pop to the next slide. What we're trying to do with our chats is to just change perceptions. And these are pictures that are on our social platforms, and they're hopefully going to help people just to go, I didn't know that. So let's do the slide on the left. You have the same chance of being autistic as you do being able to lick your own nose. So I know I can't do that, but I know autism runs in the family. So those two don't co-occur, but there you go. So do follow us on social media if you have the time. Okay, next slide. Hidden disabilities are just that. If you've got a weakness in working memory, or you are struggling with chronic fatigue, no one can really tell until you allow them to know. They might watch you like a hawk, and so they might work it out themselves, but usually they just won't know. So 1 in 7 have mental health needs, and so this costs a lot of money. And why can't we reduce the barriers to getting support so there's not such a big cost? Okay. So what I'd like to discuss next is this slide here. We have a graph, and we're looking at the spiky profile. So you can see the spikes in the purple line, and there's another line, that's slightly turquoise line, that goes through the middle. And what that's highlighting is, in order to get a diagnosis, you need to tick certain boxes. You need to be above average with certain things, such as perceptual organization, verbal comprehension, and below average with some things such as processing speed and working memory. Yeah. So on the left hand side, we've got another measurement called IQ. So that's intelligence quotient. I I really hope that one day we all get measured according to, I think it's the 6 intelligences, which would make Cristiano Ronaldo an utter genius. I don't know if you watched his goals last time. Well, his second goal was amazing. But he's actually what you would call one of nature's sort of physical genius, according to Gardner's 6 intelligences. So measuring just against one intelligence is, oh, I didn't know about that, Anne. But yeah, so measuring against one intelligence, one set of numbers is, I think, outdated, because it was really used in the First World War to make sure you could hold a gun and go off into war. But it's outdated now. So what we're looking at is the system that we're born into, this civilization as such, in the Western world, creates us to be generalist. So we have to be generally good at everything. So reading, writing, physical intelligence, stuff like that. If you went to Latin countries, your intelligence would be more highly rated if you're more sociable. And so if you go to different places around the world, different things in that society are more highly regarded. Yeah, so we can look at what that boils down to. So when you start your job, they want you to be good at everything, a little bit of everything. But then when you get better and niche yourself, then you become a specialist. So what quite often happens is people with neurodiversity, they start off as specialist thinkers, and they're not so good at integrating themselves to become generalists. And sometimes that can cause a barrier in the workplace. Yeah. So thanks, Anne. I didn't know that. Just noticing the chat box going on there. All right, let's pop to the next slide. Oh, let me just finish off on that last slide. If you are not able to tick boxes and create a spiky profile, then you will not be able to have the official diagnosis. So I had an official test to see if I had dyslexia, because I have an absolutely atrocious working memory. Stuff just pops right in and out of my head all the time. It's really frustrating, although I have come to terms with myself doing that. I also know that I solve problems at the drop of the hat. So I'll see things and be able to just go, well, why don't we just do that? But the reason I couldn't get my dyslexia diagnosis is because I can spot my own spelling mistakes. I'm quite good at spelling because I love words and I love language. Yeah. So otherwise, if I couldn't spot that so well, I would probably have a dyslexia diagnosis. So just because somebody's gone for something and they haven't had it doesn't mean they're not going to be struggling the same way. Yeah. So it's a bit of a grey area, but hey, we love grey. Yeah. So just be aware of that happening as well. It's not all black and white when people get tested. So as I was saying, the spikes, and here they are written. We've got basically what I just said. So perceptual reasoning. I said verbal comprehension, didn't I? So that's different. And then processing speed and working memory. So what's happening? Let me just bring up another slide ever so quickly. Because this is, if I was with you in person, I would draw this in front of you. I hope everyone can see that. This is like my rubbish drawing of 2 smiley faces, it's 2 people. On the left, you've got a neurotypical, on the right, you've got a neurodiverse. Neurotypical person has got room above, well, in their attention span, so in the forefront of their attention, to hold about 7 bits of information. That's what we call working memory. Your creative, holistic thinking person there's nothing going on. There might be a moth fluttering by, or a balloon or something, just random. So this is why people can be very creative, is because there's just nothing there until there's something there. On the left, the neurotypical is very good at delivering information sequentially, in order, recalling information when put on the spot. Your neurodiverse person, no, not so much, unless they really know their stuff. But if you're asking them for new information, they will ramble. the thing that is happening for someone, which is quite useful to pay attention to, when you're neurodiverse, you're always looking at something from different angles. So if you have noticed, if you've ever worked with somebody who's neurodiverse, so whether they've got dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, they will always try and explain, or they call it over-explaining. But once they understand that they're actually always seeing things from at least 3, if not more, different angles, then it's not over-explaining, it's trying to explain as much as possible when you can just sense more, you can see more. Yeah. On the top left-hand side of my slide, I've got an eyeball. Yes, I have. You've got 2 structures in your eye in this model. You've got peripheral vision, which is the rods. So if you did side eye, if you kind of like just looked out of the side of your eye, you can make stuff out. So it stops you from like bumping into stuff in the dark so badly and, you know, seeing stuff, but you can't actually make out that much detail. And then the middle of the eye, the structures that you use for reading and seeing the fine detail, the fovea, this is where there is a physiological difference in the eyeball of somebody with dyslexia or dyspraxia or the dysis. And what that translates to in the workplace is a 40% slower reading speed on average. Yeah, and if you think about it, the parallel between the thinking process, i.e., I see the bigger picture, I connect random things, I can see relationships and patterns. Yeah, I don't really look at the fine detail so much. Why would that not be reflected in the eyeball? Yeah, so the physical reflects the internal wiring. Yeah, and again, this thing here on the top right is an example of working memory. Another way of looking at working memory, other than as a conveyor belt of information passing through our attention span, is of thinking of working memory as a way of fishing for information. So you know those claw arcade machines where you have like some fluffy toys and like you've got some expensive toys in there and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna try and find the expensive toy with my grabby arm, you can't get your claw over it quick enough before someone turns out the lights, and then when your claw goes down, you're just kind of fishing and grabbing around for this expensive toy, and that expensive toy is the important bit of information you want to find. And that happens every day, constantly, for people with a weakness in working memory, which is typical of a neurodiverse brain because it's holistic and creative.
Just wanted to put one information to all of you that in terms of reading, as Martina mentioned, most people on the neurodiverse, not most, but quite a lot, do actually have a problem with reading speed, for example. One of the assistive technologies that we've been extremely excited and successful with is a program called Super Reading. It's a course that rewires your brain to be able to read 5 words at a time up to that level after about 5-6 weeks of practice, about 1 or 2 hours a day reading with the technique.
Oops.
We've actually allowed a person with dyslexia who could do 25 words a minute and have about 25% comprehension, we could get him to about 150 words a minute within about 5 weeks and with about 80-90% comprehension. Now, that's been actually scientifically proven by London South Bank University project, where it compared it against a population of 500 university lecturers. Dyslexic people improved their reading speed by 500%. And what's more, non-dyslexic people, the one who have a normal reading speed of about 150 words a minute, within the same period actually went up to about 650 words a minute with 90% comprehension. The technique rewires the brain to read in a really good way. So it's been actually around for about 10 years. No, it's been around for 25 years. But for the past 10 years, we've been using that in university sector. And recently, I did a couple of pilots, one for a university, another one for a school. The school teacher who was doing it as a PhD project, she's reported 17-month improvement in reading speed of children with dyslexia in a matter of a few months. So it is something that can be done on it. So hopefully, if you want details, Anna has put that into the chat box. I'll shut up now. You can carry on, Martin.
No, thanks, Nasser. That's really helpful. I appreciate that. It's great to have you here and to be able to share this information, because it's of benefit to everyone, I believe. So Gordon was saying in the chat box, could you as a representative push OT for a second opinion in addition concerning your last points? Right. So if you got a diagnosis and then it didn't cover some other struggles, then you could possibly push for it. That I don't see why not. Once you educate yourself a little bit more about what it is that's the diagnosis that you're going for. Because a lot of people, the dyspraxia gets missed completely because, so I was working with a GP and GP's writing standard is like hieroglyphics. But actually he always had difficulty holding small things like screws, like putting screws and putting things together. He'd just pop out his hand all the time. And plus when he was training to be a surgeon, he got asked to not use his shoulder while suturing. Yeah, so when you're suturing, you're making small movements with your wrist and your hand. And he actually incorporated his arm, his shoulder, his arm into the movement, which made me think, that's quite dyspraxic to not know exactly what part of your body you're supposed to be moving at one time. So you just moved a lot of it and hope for the best. So just, and in the questions, I'm sorry, I don't know the information to that at all. But it could be highly likely that somebody who's had to pretend to be something else for a very long time could possibly end up with some mental health problems. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Okay, let's pop to the next slide. So as I said, the school system is set up to make us all try and do the same thing. And for a lot of us, that's lovely. And for a lot of us, that's not. We're thinking that there's about 15 to 20% of the population who are living with neurodiversity. And so to accommodate them in the workplace, we're looking at just allowing reasonable adjustments to take place. What we're advocating at Genius Within is to not wait. I've already said this, I'm repeating myself, but just to not wait for an official diagnosis, but to see what you can do in the meantime to be able to support that person to reduce stress and anxiety, because that's what it's all about. Yeah, if you're not doing well, if you're not able to fulfill your KPIs, if you're upsetting other people, then obviously life is not going to be that pleasant until you work out what needs to happen, what needs to change. And also, as I've already said, a lot of people go through life not having a clue that they are living with a slightly different build to most other people. And there was a book that somebody mentioned, I think, Being Human. I'll send the books. I'll send the books to Anna because I didn't bring my pages with me. I've just had to move house because internet issues. But there are some really useful books. Professor Amanda Kirby is publishing a book, and it's called Neurodiversity in the Workplace. So that's coming out on the 3rd of August.
And she has a very good blog on the LinkedIn. It's called Diversity 101. It's amazing bits of information. You really will find it very useful. Yeah, Amanda is a unique person. I've known her for about 25 years, and she's a doctor. She's a psychologist. She's both medical as well as the non-medical. So she's got the amazing capability and understands this subject matter so well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and we're actually working with Amanda, as I said, on this screening tool that we've got on our website on Genius Within, where you can go for free and you can send somebody there and you can help them to start a conversation about the struggles they might be having. Kirby, Kirby, Nicola? No. Kirby. So we're working with Amanda to help to reduce the barriers to getting support and to understand, that's exactly it, and to understand what it is that the person is struggling with. But this slide you've got in front of you is based on the work of Mary Colley, and it's called a Adhd chart. And it's a really nice way of saying, well, look, there's like a beautiful spectrum of neurodiversity. And on the slide at the top left, we have neurominorities. So some people don't like diversity, they like neurominorities. It's up to the individual how they like to express what's happening for them. And in communications, you can say neurominorities. Some people don't like neurodivergent. I think it might be because of the films. I'm not so sure about that one. Neurodiversity was coined by somebody who's received only accolades but no financial gain from it, unfortunately. A lady called Judy Singer was writing her thesis, I think it was the late 80s, and she coined the term neurodiversity because she wanted to give a set of people a name. Thank you, Anna. Yeah. So this is what we have in front of us. We have this lovely bubble chart, the Adhd chart, that shows the collection of what there is that we would include. Oh, Anna, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I suppose we just have to notice that somebody's getting very upset about something. Yeah. And quite often, can I just say, like, if you're autistic, don't take it personally, but the autistic community are very vocal in moving everybody along. And so it could well have been somebody who wanted to change the world as quickly as possible.
Well, what's that expression? There are as many opinions as there are diverse autistic people in the room. So so you can't really all agree on the same thing, which is fine. That's the nature of the conversation. By the way, before I interrupt your flow, I will be leaving this call. I've got a charity board meeting. It's an autism charity, so I've got 3 minutes. So thank you for being part of this group, and I will see everyone next week in our next session, which is the accessibility, digital and physical. So I'm so sorry I have to bail out at this halfway through this, but I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you, Martina, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Nasser. All the best.
Thank you.
All the best. What I'd like to do is invite everybody just to take a comfort break for 5 minutes. It's if that's okay with you, Anna, and the recording and everything. I find it very useful just to take a break quite regularly to be able to process. So
absolutely, that's no problem at all.
That's all right.
I'd like a drink.
Yeah, comfort break.
Yes, a comfort break.
Yes. So I'm just going to mute and stop video, and I'll be back at 3 minutes past the hour.
Okay. See everybody then.
Okay, it's 3 minutes past. I'm back. I can't tell if everybody else is, but I'll just keep talking anyway. I'm just having a look at the Q&A and just having a look at what Anne's written. Thank you, Anne. I'm just going to read it out. We have a colleague who's widely attacked, being told he can't be autistic if his difference was caused by oxygen on the brain at birth. He has a very strong medical diagnosis and is definitely autistic. Any advice on how to diffuse this polarity of opinion in neurodiverse groups? It's causing discomfort and disruption. All right, so has anyone else come across anything like this before that would like to add in the chat box while I say something? Please do pop it in the chat box. I think it's a bit like in parallel to the transgender community at the moment. You can't be female if you were born a male. That's not allowed. You're not allowed. It doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter what's happening for you in your life. We're not allowing that. So I think it's probably the bias is getting the better of people because it's pushing them out of their comfort zone. And whenever I do any training with groups, I will talk about stress management, and quite often being able to manage your own stress and maintain a good state is the beginning of clear communication. And by clear communication, I mean communication that helps somebody understand what actually it is you're saying. Yeah. If I pop open my slides, one of the biggest problems that neurotypicals have is miscommunication, and this is one of the main causes of grievances, is constant miscommunication and misunderstanding, and people who are neurominorities feeling that they're not being heard or understood. So one great example is one of my clients has got diagnosed ADHD, dyslexia. I think she's got diagnosed dyspraxia as well. And her line manager turned to her and said, "You need to stop being so sensitive." Right. So how are you going to switch off your sensitivity to what people are saying, especially when you're feeling attacked by another team? Yeah. So in that sense, the team manager, that line manager, needs training rather than the client. My client doesn't need desensitizing. In fact, her line manager needs sensitivity training, i.e., you know, it's like saying to somebody, "Well, stop being such a woman." It makes no sense. Yeah. So hopefully by having these conversations and having tools in place and resources, we can have more conversations and help to pull out the biases that are supporting people having these polarities of opinion and causing this discomfort and disruption in teams by having a more curious stance rather than saying, "Well, you want this, we don't want this, so therefore we don't want you," and trying to manage it that way. Okay, let me just check if there's anything in the chat box that I've missed. So Gordon's just added, often employers are either unable or unwilling to accept an employee has a hidden disability, quite simply because neuro issues are often not visible or simple for an ignorant employer to grasp. Exclamation mark. Yes, so quite often you'll come up against, we can't afford to do things differently. Yes, thank you, Anna. So there's a video in there. What you have to know is that there is a legal framework in place called the Equalities Act that supports the individual who has a right to have the environment changed to suit them, so not the other way around. And often the employer doesn't realize that they are directly or indirectly discriminating against their own employees. All right, so I'm a bit I'm going to follow my slides, but this will come up again, this whole legal side of things. When we're coaching, most of the time, like the highest percentage of coaching we do is around memory and concentration, and then organizational skills, then time management, and then communication. So just so you know that actually the thing that upsets people and they struggle with the most, those are the things. Yeah, and if you can get support in, you know, not ask people to remember stuff on the spot, go out of your way to say, look, stop and write this down, or do you want me to send you an email? So finding strategies that work well for the person to support them is always helpful and beneficial. Next, there's a little slide on how we got to the language that we're using now. And what I'd like to just move towards is the sense of inclusivity when we're talking about people. So in the old days, when we start, I mean, this is 19th, 20th century, the earliest, I think the earliest recorded mention of dyslexia was, I think, in the 18th century. So people were noticing it back then. And there's not a lot of call to be able to write in those days. It was more important to be able to grow your own food, sew your own clothes, and make sure you can fix the roof over your head, things like that. But nowadays, we've moved away from having to do all of that. So the language has also changed. The big problem, and I think this is why autistic people who've read up on, you know, the history of autism are actually quite angry, is because it used to be labeled, and this is including ADHD as well, it used to be labeled as a mental disorder. Yeah, a lot of younger people don't know that. A lot of younger autistic people are just like, well, I'm autistic and I just have different sensitivities, but they don't even know that used to be a thing. And also the latest thing to come out is that Hans Asperger was actually linked to sending young children to letting them die of pneumonia, because they weren't able, he didn't think they were capable of living a normal life. So a lot of people now in that community don't even want to be linked to Asperger's or Hans Asperger. Yeah, so there's lots changed, and the way to not worry about what you are saying and your languaging is to just be on LinkedIn every, like, maybe once a week, and just catch up what you know, with what's up there. With, from Amanda Kirby's a good one. Nancy writes for Forbes now. Nancy Doyle is our director at Genius. So just following people who are thought leaders is probably the best way to just keep yourself abreast of the information. And in the 21st century, on this slide, you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, it says neurodiversity, neurodivergence, neurominority. Dopamine and noradrenaline refers to what's happening for people with ADHD. Those are the endocrine systems, your hormones that you're struggling with. And then hyperconnectivity, hyper and hyposensitivity in the world of autism and dyspraxia. So things can be happening there as well with those words. Next slide. Okay, so because I work on a Mac, that's the reason why the top font is not as good as the bottom font. So just anybody who's noticing that, that's why. It just all got squiffed. Back in 2006, there was a meeting at the United Nations, and they came up with something called universal design. And what that means is that modern devices, so if you pick up your phone, you can actually talk at your phone and make it do things for you. Yeah. And in fact, the reason that we have these beautiful phones that have got touch screens is because someone back in the 90s thought that it would be easier for, I think somebody came up with it, not for neurotypicals, but for neurodiverse people. Oh, wait, I've been asked to go back to 2 slides. So I will do that. That's this one here. Elsena, is that the one you want? All right, so I'm just going to leave that up there just for a moment. So yes, so the reason we've got touchscreen phones is because some neurodiverse person thought it was actually a good idea to not have to use buttons, because some people can't find the buttons. If you're partially sighted, why have tiny little buttons? I mean, if you ever use the BlackBerry, then you'll know what I'm talking about. You just barely work out what you're doing. So a lot of these things have come about from people trying to make things better, and now we're using all sorts of accommodations. So is it all right if I'm just move forward? Yeah, you're welcome. So I'm just going to move us along back to where we were. There we go. All right. So that's how you have those accommodations and adjustments. They've come about from the concept of universal design, and so that we're able to press a button on our computer and dictate, or press a button on a computer and ask it to read out to us. Now, there's bits of software that are usually what we see in the office called Dragon, which is dictation software, and text help. Yeah, and those 2 bits of software are much better than what's on most computers, but we're probably going to see that the computer systems are going to get better, but there's still a big yawning gap between most computers' ability to listen to your voice and type up for you. Maxine, yes, yeah, it's all autism, and I think we'll probably come away from the word spectrum as well. I don't think and disorder I don't like personally at all. So I think we'll be coming away from anything that has like a negative bias. But just so you know that when you're working with people, it is a total shock to the system. They feel like their whole life has been ripped away from under them when they have a diagnosis. So it might well be that somebody's come to you, they've just been diagnosed. Firstly, they have to deal with the fact that their whole life could have been different if they'd had a diagnosis when they were younger, so the right support at the right time. And secondly, they probably also found themselves in a bit of a tricky position at work. So they wouldn't be coming to you as a disability lead if they didn't need advice about disability. So there could be so much more going on for that person at that point in time. I mean, I did have somebody at Lloyd's who didn't tell them that he's got dyslexia, and then he was doing fine for the first year on his graduate training scheme, and then in the second, I think in his 3rd rotation in his 2nd year, because you know every 6 months they have to go to a different team, he had his role didn't work for him. He really struggled, and then he said, oh, it's because of my dyslexia. So then he told them he had dyslexia, and it all turned into a bit of a mess. Yeah. And that's probably the other thing that you've come across a lot is, you know, when do I tell my employer? Is it safe for me to tell my employer? But actually, the framework has been in place for a long time. And often employers aren't held accountable unless you've told them that there is a problem. Yeah, so the Equalities Act, which you'll all know about, I'm sure, states that you don't have to have an official diagnosis, you just have to be suffering from something for 12 months or be struggling with something for 12 months. So I'll pop past that one because that's fairly common knowledge. So we're also talking about levels of inclusion here in this oh, there we go, press the right button. So at the moment, what we've got is exclusion moving to compliance. So what happens? Oh, thanks, Mark, for just updating us from Northern Ireland. Yep. A lot of employers are still at this level of, oh, right, okay, we can't exclude these people. We have to comply. So that is why you are probably seeing things like, well, we have to put wheelchair ramps in. We have to have hearing loops on our telephones. We might put in some unisex, uniperson, human being toilets that have got different labeling and signage on them. So we might just be complying to make sure that our individuals are taken care of. So what we're hoping for is to move into deliberate inclusion, which is, yeah, we do that as a matter of course. And if there's anything that you need, definitely let us know, and we'll do our best to put that in place. So you're deliberately including the needs of the individuals in your teams. And hopefully, let me just move my little boxes out the way. What we're moving to is systemic inclusion for all. Now, what that means is you don't need to tick boxes when you apply for a job. You know that you're going to get your interview questions a week in advance. You know that you can take your notes into the interview. You know that you can be open and honest with people and say, look, I've got a weakness in working memory and this is how I deal with it. So as long as I have access to this software or these devices, you don't have to worry about me. If you take them away, then we'll have a problem. So, and this is what's happened for people that they've had systems in place, or they've had job roles that have really suited them, and then the systems have got like their best friend at work who does all their proofreading, has left, so no one does the proofreading anymore. So suddenly they're really anxious that their writing's not going to be good enough, and they've got no one to do that for them. So having the software in place, so the Foreign Office, the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office have automatically on all their devices a reader software. Yeah, so you don't even ask for it. The probation service for years now have only been printing out on cream or recycled paper, because the reduction in contrast is of benefit to an eyeball that struggles with high contrast. Yeah. So Gordon's just added in the chat box. Employers don't know why they're doing it, but they know they have to do it. So hopefully we'll be having lots of conversations, and you as ambassadors of disability will be able to share that there are lots of things that can be done, and at little to no cost. Because this is the thing I think that lots of employers struggle with, is they think, how much is that going to cost? This bit of software, you want a special chair, and just so you can get your work done for us. So there's that level of duty of care balanced with, well, do you want your business to do well? Like, do you want people to spot if your business is going to make a big mistake and cost you money? Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Simple things. Thank you, Gordon. Simple things make big improvements. Absolutely. And hopefully we'll be moving towards more systemic inclusion in the future, in the very near future. Okay, so my next slide. Let me just move all my boxes out of the way. So it is quite disheartening to see these figures sometimes, to know that there are actually a lot of autistic people who can't access the workplace, and it is mainly because of the sensitivities in place, and I think there is Auticon who does autistic recruitment, but again, it's like usually white males with brown hair who are good at computer programming, so there's a stereotype going on. Thank you for adding that in the chat box, Steve. So there's a reasonable adjustment passport. There's also the disability passport, but I think people are renaming those. Yeah, so just calling them workplace passports. I heard of a team who one of their team members was filling in a disability passport, and the other team members were like, hang on, what have you got there? That looks cool. So they all filled one in, and then they renamed it, because why call it disability? Why not just call it accessibility passport or something really cool like that? So that was a lovely story that I've heard just recently. Yeah, so I think we probably all come across the information that a lot of prisoners have ADHD, but not only ADHD, but lots of dyslexia and dyspraxia in there as well. And I think I'm coming near to the end of my slide deck. So direct discrimination is just so you know, we're just covering it in a slide, is making assumptions about capability and treating it differently as a result. Failure to make reasonable adjustments. So the last really big court case was where an autistic employee said, listen, I can't cope with the level of noise in this workspace. Can you please put me somewhere where there's less busyness and less noise? And the employer said, no, you've got this job role, so you have to sit here. Yeah, you can have a noise cancelling headset and get on with it. And that was taken to court. I can't remember exactly. Was it a big power company? Does anyone know who it was? It's just popped out of my head. And thanks, Steve. Yeah, Unison. We have to have national acceptance. They have renamed it. That's lovely. Yeah. So if anyone works out who it was, that last big court case of direct discrimination, and the employer actually was defeated in that case. All right, so indirect discrimination. So these three pictures in front of us, we've got people behind a fence on a box each, and the person with the shortest legs is not able to see anything over the fence. A second image, it's going more towards equity. So the person with the shortest legs, or the smallest person, has got two boxes, so they can just about see over the fence. And in the third picture, all three can see the game without any supports or accommodations, because the cause of the inequity was addressed and the systemic barrier has been removed. Yeah, so think about when you're looking at your organization, people are coming to you, what are the systemic barriers in place at the moment? Is it the technology? Is it the policies? What ways of working are causing barriers? Yeah, and the people coming to you with their problems will be the ones telling you what's going on. Yeah, I think there's often a big conflict and a clash between the employer wanting to maintain a status quo because they're keeping within their comfort zone, and then the individual saying, well, can we change this, please? Because this isn't working for us. And it's not until you get a groundswell of people. So you have maybe a smattering of people one year, and then you have 10, 20 people the next year, and then maybe 50 people the third year. I think somehow making that easier to be able to report and have things changed without upsetting too many people, because we all like our comfort zones, don't we? This is true. That would be a good way forward. The next slide, we have some adjustments that could possibly be quite easy to put in place. We obviously at Genius Within, we do a lot of coaching, so we're all for that. There's also the assistive technology and workstation adaptions. On the right hand side of the slide, scheduling flexibility. So we're all used to things like, well, I've got to drop the kids off, so is it okay if I come in a bit later and work a bit later? If you've got ADHD or autism, then it might be, can I work on a Saturday and not come in on a Monday? Would that be cool? So allowing that. I read somewhere, I don't know if everybody saw this, but somebody posted on social media that working from home shouldn't be seen as a privilege anymore. I don't know if anyone else has seen that, but pre-lockdown, it was really hard to get people to be allowed to work from home. And this is one of the things that really helps people who are constantly listening out to others. I had one of my clients, I asked her to move from the end of a workbench or workstation to further away from the walkway, because she's got dyspraxia and dyslexia, and she noticed that there was a big difference in her ability to focus because her body wasn't picking up on everybody walking past. Yeah, so, oh, Natalia, I'm so sorry to hear that. So I would question, I'd really question that. So my employer told me he couldn't make too many adjustments for me because non-neurodiverse members of the team could get jealous. Wow. were you asking for a mini bar or like a pool table or something? I mean, obviously, yeah, that makes no sense. I would say what I often coach my clients to do is to create a business case. So what is your, so what is it that you need to have put in place and why? What impact will it have? How much more work will they get out of you? Yeah, and then you can create a business case for the thing that you need. Yeah, I think often managers, they are not able to move because everyone's so overwhelmed at the moment, and will be for a while, I imagine. They're in their mammalian brain, so they're not actually able to be that flexible, unfortunately. But it's up to us as individuals, and maybe buddies can help you with that to put it forward. Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Anna, for putting a workshop link in there. So yeah, some formal training and also environmental flexibility. So as a disability lead or having a diversity champion or having an intranet in the organisation where you can contact other people who might have had similar experiences would possibly help you to be able to put your case forward. Because quite often I'll meet people and they've just run out of energy to fight for themselves. And I completely accept that. I can totally understand that has worn people down years and years and years of like trying to be like everyone else and not being able to, and just having to work a bit harder. I'm just going to read out what Gordon said. Working from home has finally helped prove the thesis with either hidden or physical disabilities can be productive because they have their own home-based reasonable adjustments, which goes to prove that if reasonable adjustments are put in place within workplaces would result in disabled employees actually being treated equally with barriers being removed. Surprise, surprise, if you put things in place, people can just get on with it. And that's, if you think about it, all people want to do, they just want to be useful and do something productive and just have a nice life and be like everybody else. So in one sense, lockdown has been a bit of a miracle in a lot of ways, and a bit of a struggle in other ways. So my next slide, we're looking at success rates, and this is to do with coaching. So if you have access to coaching, that's fantastic. We've noticed that with coaching, there's always an improvement. So if you're able to coach the person that's coming to you, that would be fantastic. And also know that there's people like ourselves that offer coaching via Microlink. Cool. All right, lovely. Thanks, Anna, for putting a link to an article in there into the chat box. Okay, so let me just pop to the next slide. So hopefully this has been helpful into giving you a bit of a lens into neurodiversity. It's been a bit of a whirlwind tour. You've sat patiently or been standing or pacing or been lying, whatever you've been doing. Thank you for your attention. The slide that I promised a while ago has now appeared. If you want to access a free tool on our website, it's the Genius Screener, and it's easily accessible from on geniuswithin.co.uk. Please go and have a go, share it with everyone you know and love. It's really useful to just notice where your strengths and weaknesses are, and also just to get some tips and tricks. We use it a lot to help managers to start conversations with people who might be struggling and are trying to hide that they're struggling. So it's quite good, and it covers a lot of questions. So creative skills, problem solving, written word, orientation, dexterity, lots of things. So we're trying to just pull out information that you might not get in the course of a normal conversation. So by all means, go and have a go at that. At Genius, we're working on moving from awareness to action. So there's just this little slide in here. So position number 1 is legal compliance. So we're having a look at that, what's going on there. And position number 2 on the right is the ecosystem. So considering the bigger picture. Number 3 is finding the pathway, so putting the right adjustments in place, and looking at employee experience. So that includes recruitment, onboarding, and professional development, things like that. And to position number 4, which is systemic resolution. So reducing individuals being singled out. Yes, so it's like, oh, well, they'll get jealous if you have a headset and they don't. Some people wouldn't want a headset on all day, that it would ruin their hair. So, you know, I don't understand what the manager's saying. Just put me in front of that manager, just send me there. So yeah, what we're looking to do at Genius is to help to reduce this discomfort around change, which is a normal human reaction, by way of raising awareness and helping people to implement very simple things, but also to go deeper into understanding their unconscious biases. So that's what we're working on here. The actual, one of the biggest things about inclusion is how it can actually reduce costs of adjustments. So by having it in there naturally, instead of just saying, oh, it's just this one thing for this one person, why don't we just, how many things can we get for everybody? So maybe that might make all the difference. Okay, next slide is something that's been put in that I don't think I really want to explain, but it's just a commissioning checklist. So I won't spend too much time on that. And if there's anything that you think, oh, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about that, then please do ask me. And then we can set up a conversation with you at some point. And here are our services. So hand in hand with Microlink, we deliver a lot of services, and feel free to ask. So I'm going to, I think this is, yeah. All right, so we've got to the end of the presentation. There's Nancy. There's our contact details. I'm going to go back to this one. What I'd like to do is invite Anna back in into the conversation, and also just stop talking at you and see if there's any more questions that you'd like to have answered, or to have a little chit chat amongst ourselves. So I'm going to open up the floor right now. Hi, Anna.
Hello. I've been very busy in the background trying to find all these links, and as you've been talking, so I've just put the profiler in, the Genius screening. I'll put that in, but of course everybody has to register and put your email and password and whatever.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we do. It's just, you know, it's so we can send it out to you. So that's fantastic. Yeah. So if do you want to know any more about the dyslexia, dyspraxia? Do you want to know more about reasonable adjustments? Let me know. Let me know you're still out there in the comfort of your own home or workspace, wherever that may be. Is anyone by a pool?
I wish.
It would be the day.
So 2 things have been of particular interest from Nadia. What 2 things, Nadia? I hope she's going to put it in, and putting something else in the chat. Adult ADHD clinic is asking for detailed info from parents and teachers. As a late diagnosis, this is pretty difficult. How essential is it to have early years picture reports from relatives and teachers? Can it be worked around? How would a neurodiverse refugee get full diagnosis?
Yeah, that is. So probably the best thing is to get in touch with one of our assessors. Yeah, is to find that out. Is to just drop us an email at Genius and see if we've got a, because so at Genius we created something called positive assessments, because before people were coming out with like 50-page reports and then just pushing them to one side. I mean, if you've got dyslexia or dyspraxia, like why would you spend a day of your life trying to read through a chunky report that you don't understand? So one of the things that we've done is to change the way these reports are done. So when we go out to assess somebody, we will tell them, well, these are your strengths. Yeah, so this will be your brand. So when you're at work, this is what you need to be selling about yourself. If you're going for a new job, go for jobs that let you do this a lot. So positive assessments is a big thing at Genius. And the other question was, if a person's symptoms fluctuate, how accurate can a single point in time diagnosis be? That's a good question, especially with autism, because somebody can be high functioning one day and really low functioning the next, and with ADHD as well, because that's more behavioral. So yeah, and that's why the diagnosis takes like a couple of years with those things. I'm just noticing that we've got, yeah, the terminology around neurodiversity that's not best described as a disability. Yeah, it depends on your person as well, Nadia. So if you've got somebody who's like, well, I've got this disability and like I just can't remember stuff when I need to remember it, then you just use their words. Yeah. So when I'm coaching people, I like to big them up as much as possible and then support their weaknesses by saying, oh, sometimes I forget stuff. Yeah, or sometimes I have a weakness in working memory, or sometimes I can't focus for love nor money. Yeah, so it depends on the person and how they want to describe it. And calling it a disability, if you think about it, we've created a social model of disability. So because you can't read or write that well, it means that you're stupid. But actually the person can read and write, but we're just not testing them on stuff that they're actually really good at and above average at, which is critical thinking, problem solving, spatial orientation, things like that. So not testing them on stuff that's actually more useful for helping us to survive our current problems. I'm just having a look at the next thing. Natalia, I think you're amazing. You've created your own reasonable adjustments at work. Because they're unrealistic. Is that you with your minibar? Or did you want a pool as well? I mean, the jacuzzi might be a bit far.
I asked NASA for all that, but no.
Yeah. So I would like to understand what reasonable adjustments you're asking for, because if they're going to, again, create a business case, have a look to see how much time the stuff is going to save you, because it could well be, remember, creative, holistic thinking brains are always trying to solve a problem and you can't switch that off, okay? You're all using computers because an autistic guy decided that the only way to break a code was to create a computer, yeah? Not have like 100 code breakers have 24 hours to break a code. So Alan Turing, highly autistic, was like, I've got my mind set on creating this thing, so that's why we're all able to talk on this right now. So was his request unrealistic to create a computer the size of a shed back in the day? So just the compromise of reasonable adjustments actually comes up a lot. Yeah, so I would have a look at the business case and see what are the trade-offs. And yeah, it is very frustrating sometimes. Is it easy to obtain Dragon software, but the standard office layout is open plan? I'm not sure exactly what that question means. If you could rewrite it, that would be really helpful. Yeah, disability. Oh, right, okay. Don't react when upset. Really? Is that a reasonable adjustment? Okay, I would need to know more about that. Okay, cool. So unless there's anything else, oh, just get in touch with Anna, and Anna will forward. Yeah. So forward, Anna. Thank you, Anna. I'm just volunteering you, Anna.
Well, that's the point of the workshops, is to help everybody on the call.
Yeah. Because the thing is that you're all role models and ambassadors now. So if you're getting it right, then you can spread the message to the next 10, 100 people, 1,000 people to get it right. Yeah. So that's a really important thing, that you hopefully you're going to create that message and be able to spread it. Cool. What support can you give to organisations seeking to develop a strategy to address these issues? All of the stuff on the slide in front of you, that's everything that we do at Genius, and more. I'm sure we chats, hanging out, all sorts of stuff we do. So whatever needs to happen, we will try and make it happen in order to reduce the the unconscious bias and to create more systemic inclusion. Hybrid work, what's a hybrid working environment, Nadia? Is that at home and at work as well? Is that
what I understood?
Yeah, hybrid. Yeah, thanks. So some people, well, everybody's unique. Let's put it like that. And you can say, right, I'm autistic, so therefore I like working on my own. It's not true for everybody who's autistic. Yeah. Some autistic people are like the most joyful, bouncy people who would never want to be left out of stuff in the office. Yeah. So it's up to the individual to decide what's best for them. And I think probably having a one size fits all is great. So we all, you know, we go into the workplace, there is a desk, there is a chair that is adjustable. Yeah. Is it a standing desk? No. Do you want to stand? Yeah, that would be nice on occasion. Yeah. So hybrid working, we've just found out, latest thing for public service, mix of home-based and office working. Yeah, cool. I think the biggest gap last year in lockdown was the fact that people were having to work off their tablets, having to work off their own laptops because they weren't able to use the things that they were accustomed to in the workplace, like a big screen or two big screens. So then that was all being shipped into their own homes, and then they were having to work off the end of their bed. Or I had one lady who was sat on her landing in my training this morning. So, I mean, it looked like she was in an office, but she's like, no, I'm on my landing. So yeah, I think this has caused a huge, almost useful bit of turmoil to create a bit more inclusion. So, wait, no diagnosis required. Wait, where did that come from, Nadia? Right, so here's the thing with getting an official diagnosis: validation. You have somebody who validates your problems, and then you can hold up a report saying, look, this is me, right? So that is the biggest thing, and this is why lots of people do prefer to have a diagnosis. And what we're saying is, under the law, you don't need to have a diagnosis to say, can I please have some help? Can I have the software? Can I please work until 10 o'clock tonight and then start at lunchtime tomorrow? Yeah, so it depends again on the employer and the people you've got around you. If you could have the best line manager in the world, but if they're up against the worst departmental head in the world, then that's going to be a problem. So going internally and getting some training is going to hopefully address that. And there's lots of different training out there, and at Genius, what we're trying to address is the inclusion aspect of going, right, okay, so what happens when you have to compromise on reasonable adjustments? Yeah, whose problem is the worst? So if one person wants music playing, the other person can't stand music playing, and the person who needs peace and quiet to work gets into their fight, flight, freeze response because there's music playing, and the other person likes music because it helps them just to get into the zone, they're not having a fight, flight, freeze response. Yeah. So just look at what responses are happening in with regards to the person and the reasonable adjustments. And yeah, it's all about educating your employer, but it's educating the next person and then the next person. It's just, and educating is something that I get my clients to do, but in a way that's very subtle. So instead of going, I've got dyslexia, so that's why I just solved the problem before any of you lots. So some people might go out and do that, or some people say, oh yeah, I spotted that because that's what I'm really good at. And that's what my dyslexia does for me. Yeah, so it just depends. If you can go around educating and spreading the word on, these things and why they're useful, these characteristics and traits of these protected conditions, that can go quite a long way. And remember, 1 in 10 people in the workplace is likely to have a neurodiverse protected condition. So it's not like it's uncommon. No. And I think, as we were saying, in some places, NASA, before NASA disappeared, I was saying in some places it's much more prevalent because the type of work actively attracts people who think in that way, like, oh, I love a problem. Oh, I love a problem. Did you come across the GCHQ? Were actively recruiting people with dyslexia and dyspraxia about 5 years ago. Did you see that? So GCHQ is a government communications headquarters. So basically they're part of the spooks. And what they do is they listen in. I don't know how legal that is ever since Edward Snowden said that America's listening to everything. I don't know what we're up to, but listening, spotting trends and patterns and connecting random ideas is what holistic brain is really, really built to do. It's like, oh, I heard that, and could that have something to do with that? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So think about the next time you use a DVD, yeah, which slowly, thanks Netflix, is becoming obsolete. But who'd have thought a laser beam and a piece of round plastic need to go together? Someone with severe dyslexia came up with that. Yeah, and a lot of some really, really useful inventions were created by people with very holistic thinking. And that's from a book called The Dyslexic Advantage by Edie and Edie, which is quite a good read. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Because you've done ever so well. Thank you so much for joining today. We're coming close to the end of the time that we've got together. So if there's any more questions, thank you. Any more questions or comments, we welcome them now in the chat box or in the Q&A box. I'm just going to pop to the last slide. I've worn everybody out now. The brains, I can feel steam coming out of everyone's brains now.
Well, I'd like to say that you've done amazing, Martina. This has been a really enjoyable, well-paced workshop. I really appreciate it. I hope that our attendees feel the same way. And I learned stuff today, so thank you.
You're so very welcome, Anna. Thank you. And thanks so much for setting it up. Do you know what? I love working with Microlink, and I love telling my clients that have come via yourselves that Microlink are so great, you know, super helpful, very knowledgeable. So it's always a pleasure.
It's our passion. Disability is our passion, and
yeah.
leveling the playing field and giving everybody equal opportunity to life and to success and thriving is what we live for.
Yeah,
so, yeah. And I know Nancy for sure lives by that code. So yeah.
That's Nancy there, everybody.
Yeah.
Just so this is Dr. Nancy Doyle, who's like super ADHD and runs Genius with the help of a couple of other people. Thank you to everybody who joined today. You know, this would have been nothing without your attendance and your really lovely questions. And do get in touch if you need any more support from Anna or myself at Genius. Slides are going to be so, I think the slides were, totally. Sharing is caring.
Yeah, we've made it fully accessible so it can be read by, you know, screen readers and whatever. So it's all ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
Sending it out tomorrow. We usually give it 24 hours to get verbit. The guys who are doing the captioning, they do all the, you know, the preparation of the video, the recording and whatever. So we'll be sending that out probably tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think you've sent out some information. We've got a YouTube channel as well. I've got some, like, I'm really visual, so if I can watch it, I'd rather watch it than read it. So we've got on our YouTube channel, we've got some like nice nifty little videos that are quite useful and informative. So hopefully you might have time to have a look at them. And Yeah.
I think we can wrap up now if Mark Anthony's happy to do that as well, because I know he's on the call. Yeah, next workshop is on the 24th, as Nasa said, and that's at 10 a.m. I believe, and that's all around e-learning and accessibility and the built environment and what you can do and what we need to do and blah blah blah. So that's
I was having a moan about e-learning this morning, Anna, because I said, you know, e-learning doesn't work for a lot of my clients. Yeah, because you just get one screen of information. If you've got a holistic thinker on the other end of that screen, they need to see everything at once.
Oh, well, maybe I need to send you our e-learning platform and you have a look at it. It's been built in America by some very clever people, and it's lots of videos and it's lots of interaction. So I'll send it to you. You have a look.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. Thank you.
Love your feedback.
Yeah. Quite often the thing that stops people wanting to do e-learning is the small amount of information in the screen, the working memory weakness. So like I have to read something and then I have to remember that to answer a pop quiz on the next in like 5 pages time. The contrast, not being able to fiddle with that. So not being able to fiddle with the information on the screen often stops people from really wanting to look at it and integrate with it.
Yeah. So
yeah, send me that and I'll have a look. All right, brilliant stuff.
I think I've got an Amazon delivery I have to leave.
Right, okay.
So I just had the doorbell go.
All right, everybody. All right, that's it. We've been told.
Sorry. Good. Anyway,
right.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you. Have a lovely afternoon. Take care.
Thank you, Martina.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Burbit. Bye.
Bye.